Like to call Board of Supervisors meeting to order. As always, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance in the moment.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. We do have a little bit of an irregular meeting. Anything we need to add to this agenda? Anybody?
Come every day.
It's a pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Let's start with our special appearance. Kyle, Davenport and Company. Come on up and tell us about our financing options.
Mr. Chairman, good afternoon or evening. I guess it's that time. I'm not sure which it is. It's springtime, so I'm gonna call it afternoon. It's nice outside, but nice to see y'all in person. It's great. We haven't been doing much of this recently, so this was exciting for any variety of reasons, and one of which is we get to come see y'all in person. So we appreciate that. And I think as a follow-up to discussions we had back in February, when it was just miserably cold and raining, sitting in a different conference room in much more confined spaces. It seems like a couple of years ago since we did that, but if you recall, a big topic of conversation at that point was our capital projects. And we'll talk about what those look like here in the next couple of pages, but how is it that we go about financing those within best practices, within a responsible way that is going to be least impactful to your budget, meaning most cost effective to the taxpayer, and also is going to be something that'll be receptive to lenders as we go out and go through that process. And so if you fast forward what may have felt like a couple of years, but really just a couple months, we have gone through that process, and we are here now with some results and recommended next steps in terms of how we would go about financing our major capital projects, including our middle school, our radio system, and last but not least, administration building improvements. So we'll go page by page. You all have in front of you, I have on the screen here, and if I can successfully work the clicker, try and go page by page here. Here we go. So on page number 1, we talk about overview of capital funding analysis. And this page looks purposely very similar to what we talked about back in February. Again, this all kind of goes together with that multi-year planning effort that we started back in the February timeframe. And if you recall at that time, we talked about 2 important concepts as we think about financing major capital projects like you have. The first, number 1 there, debt capacity. The second is debt affordability. So now that it is budget season, now that it is time to in some sense, come to some more concrete decisions on how these projects will be paid for, our primary sort of topic area today is debt affordability, or really what is the impact to the budget and how are we able to responsibly and hopefully successfully, we think we'll be successful, finance these various capital projects that are outlined just below there. So mention these at the outset, but just to put some numbers to it, what we're talking about is our radio project at about 5.86 million, around that to about 5.9. We know that could be a little bit less, but that's the biggest number we've been working with on purpose. Always easier to go low, meaning come down as opposed to adding to. We're talking about a borrowing. Number 2 is our primary school project at about $9.1 million. And last is the administration center project at about $1.3 million. Add those all up. If we've done our math correctly, you get to about 16.2 total in terms of new money, capital improvements within the county. We make a little footnote there at the bottom as we've been working with with Jack and with MJ, thinking about multi-year planning in concert with your budget. This doesn't necessarily take into account all the operational side of the house, although we're very well aware of that. We're going to put a finer point to that as we go forward. What we've really tried to focus on for the day is how is it we go about financing our various capital projects, and also how might we refinance some of our existing debt to make it even more palatable from a budgetary standpoint. And we'll talk through what that looks like on the next couple pages. Okay, so page 2, just a couple of the key assumptions that we lay out there. Nothing is really materially different from the last time that we've kind of run through this. Important concept, we've talked about this. The county's done a good job in building up its fund balance over the last 5 or so fiscal years. And that's important because that gives us some dollars to work with. We've called it for the moment a debt service stabilization fund, about $1.2 million as we work with Jack and with MJ in terms of finalizing some of those things. Within our numbers, we've assumed that is available to help kind of get going, give us a little running start in terms of the debt service on these new projects. And what we'll do throughout here is we'll basically run through and say, all right, if we have about $1.4 million, and it's a middle bullet point there, in existing debt payments, about $1,437,407 to be exact, how many more dollars do we need over and above that as we go into the future? And then we'll equate that to pennies in the real estate tax rate. It's budget season. We realize that when it comes to this year's budget, it's very challenging, very difficult budget. All budgets are hard, but this one especially, given the impact of economic crisis and this whole COVID-19 business. And so while we're equating this to impact to the real estate tax rate, I think a couple important points, even before we get to the numbers, there's no impact to the 21 budget by virtue of these capital projects. Number 2, just because we equate this to the real estate tax rate doesn't mean it necessarily has to come from the real estate tax rate. So make those couple points. Certainly the real estate rate is your primary and your largest revenue source, but we just want to make those couple points as we talk. Last bullet point down here at the bottom, what we've really done over the last couple months is gone through a process to identify a variety of different options to finance these projects. The first that we'll talk about in some detail is we've gone out and we've competitively bid to banking institutions. We call this a direct bank loan. Basically the new money, that $16.2 million that we talked about, as well as refunding of existing debt that we'll get to later on, to see what the banking community's appetite was in terms of putting in a competitive offer to do that. And so what we have are a couple good offers. We'll say that given the events of the last 3 or so months, it's been a very tumultuous time period within the world of commercial banks. But we think we have an option that makes a lot of sense from a cost effectiveness standpoint, makes a lot of sense from a flexibility standpoint, and also makes a lot of sense in terms of knowing what the interest rate and terms and conditions would look like, as opposed to necessarily floating within the market, as that market has been all over the place. So option A, or maybe flavor A, is what we call this direct bank loan. The other way we could go about this is we could use some of the state's pooled loan programs. The state has a couple long-standing pooled loan programs that are available to local governments. And what they basically do is serve as a conduit between us as Madison County and the larger public credit markets that trade and have billions of dollars of bonds issued every single week. There's some sort of processes to go through there. There's actually some uncertainty in terms of interest rates, because what they're really doing with those two state programs, which is VRA and VPSA, what they're really doing is serving as that conduit between us and the public credit markets. Interest rates in public credit markets change every single day. And we've just come out of a time period where they changed over the course of a month, basically more than in essence they ever have, at least in recent memory. So we've come out of this very, very volatile, very uncertain time period. And you'll hear some of that as we talk through and show you some of these pages in terms of why our thinking is what it is when it comes to, again, a direct bank loan or using some of these state programs. Okay, so as we get to page number 3, this is our bid summary, and this is really focused on the direct bank loans and the bids that we received, again, from commercial banks. So this was offered to local banks, regional banks, national banks, any and every banking institution that we can find, and we do a lot of this, so I think we've got a pretty wide net. They were all offered equal opportunity to take a look at this. And so, as I mentioned, it's been a very, I guess, tumultuous, volatile, whatever metaphor you want to throw in there, last 60 days or so. And so you're never quite certain what you're going to get back from the banks when you go through a process like this. And what we ended up getting back were 2 bids, one from Sterling National Bank, there on the left-hand side, and the other from Key Government Finance on the right-hand side. We got a bunch of feedback from other banking institutions or local names, the BB&Ts, who are now combined with the SunTrusts, the Wells Fargos, the Atlantic Unions, all of whom had a chance to look at this and ask some questions, and for one reason or another decided, largely we suspect, we don't know this, but we suspect just because they're busy, a lot of these federal loan programs that they're working through in terms of the CARES Act and the Paycheck Protection Act and those various things, they just had a lot moving through their pipeline. And so just to give you a little bit of color there, but I think what we did get, but we're going to focus on Sterling here because of these options, they're the best. What we did get is better than anything that we had planned on going back in February, which makes both the interest rate, the interest costs look better, and also looks the impact to the budget, or makes the impact to the budget look better. All of the interest rates are fixed, so we're in a very, very low rate environment right now if things have settled out. I think importantly, what we would have with these Sterling bids, we'll talk through it in more detail, but we'd have fixed rates that are known for the life of the loan. And with a couple caveats, we know what those rates are as we sit here and talk today, which is an important difference when we compare the bank loan, meaning the Sterling Bank, to our VRA and our VPSA option. That is likely the most important caveat between the two, is that with VRA and VPSA, as good a programs as they are, and they are excellent, they've been around for a very long time, by virtue of the market that they sell their bonds into, you don't know, we don't know, no one knows what the interest rate on that loan will be until such time as they sell their bonds. So in a what I'll call more normal environment, I don't know what normal is anymore, but in a normal environment, that certainly is a risk factor to take into account. And we think in this environment, whereby we have the continued impacts of really the economic toll of everything that's going on with the COVID crisis. You have the federal government doing a lot of things within the financial markets. There's the potential for more volatility to come within those public credit markets. Not within your control, not within our control, not in fairness within the state's control at VRA or VPSA. We just have a lot of variables right now out there that are impacting things, or have the potential to impact things more than in a more normal environment. I'll put some more specific numbers to that here in a couple minutes. Before we do that, we'll talk for a minute about what Sterling was able to do. So I'm going to take my eyes kind of down the pointer here works. Yeah. All right. So the way this has been broken out is we have what we call 2020A. That's the new money capital project. So that's our primary school, that's our radio system, and that's our administration building, the roughly $16.2 million. We have our 2020B, that is a refunding of an existing loan we have outstanding, 2017 bond. And then we have our 2020C, that is a refunding of another existing loan we have outstanding. That's called the 2013 bond. We'll talk through what exactly those mean, what they look like here in a couple pages. But for the moment, if you add all those up, you get to about $25 million in total is what Sterling said they were able to do for us. Compare that to Key over here. Key for whatever reason, and it's actually because the loan's a little bit longer, did not put a bid in on the new money, but for the two refundings, this B and the C down here, they put a bid in for both of those. We're not going to talk a whole lot about Key because their interest rates are above those of Sterling here on the left-hand side. But we do have a good fallback to the extent we need it on the refunding side. So we'll work down the boxes here. Tax status, there was some variability. We talked with the group meeting, sort of a smaller portion of this group last Friday. There was some question as we're working through some negotiations with your existing lenders about whether we were going to need a taxable component, which would be a little bit higher interest rate to get some of the fundings done. We think we've gotten over that hurdle, so we don't think we have to worry about that. And have been able to remove that variable from the equation. So these are all tax-exempt interest rates, which basically means they are providing a lower interest cost to the county than if we had to do any pieces of this on a taxable basis. Okay, so we get down to the security / collateral for the loan. The way these work, these are called lease revenue bonds. You have a couple of them outstanding right now. They're not general obligation bonds, but the marketplace is very, very used to that, called moral obligation bonds, which basically means you are pledging, you are almost promising to make the debt service payments as a board and as a county. It is not as strong as a general obligation pledge. And so what goes with that, quote, moral obligation pledge is a lease or a lien mortgage on a facility or two within the county. That's an existing structure that you have in place with your 2013 bonds. I'm trying to get my pointer to the right place there. So it's nothing new to Madison County, and it's also nothing new to Virginia counties. It's done with all of your neighbors as we work through that. So that's the security and the collateral. That'll come into play as we talk through next steps. Okay, maybe most important thing here on the page, what interest rates / interest rates are we talking about? For the new money portion, that roughly 16.2 million, it's a fixed interest rate for 20 years of either a 296 or 3%. So we'll talk through why there's a little bit of a slight difference there, but order of magnitude, basically locking in a 20-year fixed rate at 3% in this environment. And importantly, we know what that is today. So barring a surprise that we don't expect, if we were to move forward, we would know when we come back to you in June that those interest rates would be the same come June. Be able to work through your budget, knowing exactly which payments are. The other two interest rates here, so we have a refunding of a 2017 bond, refunding of a 2013 bond, a 245, 2017 bond is a little longer, that's why the rate's a little higher, and the 13 bond is a 239. Both of those fixed through the final maturity, which is about 12, 13 years from now. So everything kind of averages out to be in about the high 2% range when you add that all together. And it's fixed for the full term of the loan, as we mentioned. Importantly, as we get down to the prepayment provisions, while we may not necessarily be thinking about it right now in terms of entering into some new loans, this is something we think is really important because we've seen this play out over years and years and years and working with lots of your neighbors and peers. Having flexible prepayment provisions allows you to do any variety of things in the future. So you're going to go finance new capital projects over a 20-year time period or thereabouts. In some sense, when you think about the life cycle of a building, maybe that's not that long, but in terms of the life cycle of financial markets and interest rates and county budgets, That's a pretty long time. There's lots going to happen over a 20-year time period. And so what we found is the ability to have prepayment flexibility during the course of that 20-year time period is important to you. You can't necessarily quantify exactly what that means today because it depends upon how history plays out, how interest rates play out, how your budgets play out. But we have found that to be valuable just in thinking about the life cycle of the county, life cycle of capital projects. And so what Sterling has said, we actually got them to make this a little more flexible, is they have said that after the first 5 years of the loan, we could prepay anytime with no penalty. So we basically have 15 years whereby we could pay off early, we could refinance it if interest rates look more attractive, we could rework the payments, which frankly is something we're to talk about with the refundings right now. And so you have any of those variety of variables available to you within 5 years. This is an important comparison because, as we'll talk about in the next couple of pages, VRA and VPSA options don't allow you to prepay for the first 10 years. So if we're talking about a 20-year loan, you're basically locked out for the first half of the life cycle of that loan for the new money projects. And that's not necessarily a decision of the state per se, that's just how the public credit markets work. Again, they're really serving as a conduit to the public credit market. So what we'll see is that the interest rates, kind of allude to this, the interest rates for VRA and VPSA in the current marketplace are lower than what we have with Sterling. But what we know with Sterling is that A, we know what those rates are. B, they are more flexible, Sterling is in terms of prepayment than either VRA or VPSA. Okay, so that's where we are bid summary wise. Clicker here. Name it down here, maybe. Any name this thing in particular? Wow. Jack, can you move it forward a slide from your computer?
Prepayment, well, while you're figuring out the technology things, but prepayment on the Sterling,
Yep.
2027 previously.
Correct.
I think it's great that we did. How did we go from 2027 to 2027?
Yeah, we took a look at that and we saw some other bids they put in, frankly, where they put in a 5-year and just said, hey, can we have the same, same provisions as we've seen you put in other places. So that's how we got there. Okay, so if we go to the interest rate environment, we'll give you just a couple slides here. I've alluded to this. Sometimes the picture is maybe more impactful than the spoken word in some instances. And so what we have here, show you 2 different slides in terms of, we talked about this interest rate volatility and where we are in the market and what exactly does that mean. So on this slide, we're showing what's called the 20 bond index. That is a index that is published daily and tracked for tax-exempt municipal bonds. It's a little bit like watching, it's not a perfect corollary, but it's a little bit like watching maybe the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500 stocks. This is kind of the same thing for purposes of municipal bonds. It's not, it does not mean that on any given day your interest rate will be what's shown here, but it kind of shows you relative orders of magnitude when they group together a bunch of similarly rated bonds, how the market is reacting. So you look at the left-hand graph, we've shown it from 2000 until now, and you can see that you go back just 20 years ago. It's kind of frightening that 2000 was 20 years ago, but it was. And that index was at 6%, and it's kind of bounced its way down. you've got the financial crisis, a couple other little crises, and I say little, I don't mean to use that term lightly, but I think what you see here is this right here. If you can see the red pointer, is the financial crisis. One of these was the Federal Reserve taking a little bit of action that the market didn't like ahead of time. Another one of these was a bond analyst that published a report about a bunch of defaults that she thought was going to happen that didn't end up coming to fruition. And so what I think you see in this is, especially over the last 10 years, when rates tend to move, they move really fast and they move pretty severely. So you saw that here, took a little while to come back down. You saw it again here, a little while to come back down. And then what we've seen between 2019 basically and into 2020 where we are now is an incredible move lower in terms of the overall market environment. So that's what we're sort of capturing. But what is hard to see here, and that's why we blew it up over on the right-hand side, a little bit off the screen, is when this whole COVID-19 crisis happened, and it fluctuated through the economy and the stock market and the financial markets, the municipal bond market was basically shut down for all intents and purposes during the month of March. Interest rates moved, meaning as they were published, so to speak, by 200 basis points over the course of a couple of weeks. So we usually talk in terms of basis points. That's a fraction of a percentage. 200 basis points is 2 entire percent over the course of just a couple of weeks. And so we've literally just come out of it within the last couple of weeks, out of that period of volatility. I think we're in an environment now where we are all within that industry hoping that things have stabilized. But I think we all are also knowing that there's a lot of variables that are going to play out with federal stimulus, with the economy, with impacts to state budgets, impacts to local budgets. There's a lot still to happen that could impact the public credit markets. And usually, in an environment like this, I shouldn't say usually, sometimes in an environment like this, when you have news of that variety, rates tend to move very, very quickly. And so again, just want to paint that picture, especially knowing that we were in May, during the month of March, really into April. We literally just had all this volatility. So Jack, if you want to go one more page, you can do it from there. So just one more graph to demonstrate what has transpired over the course of this calendar year. We're taking a different measurement, although in the same world. So we're measuring here the 10-year maturity, what's called the Municipal Market Data Index. Basically, this is the rate on a 10-year municipal bond, is a good benchmark. Over the course of January into early March, pretty stable, came down a fair amount. And then you see that very sudden, goes from about 1% to about 3% over the course of just a couple weeks, comes shooting back down, and it's been bouncing around a little bit since. The same thing, in essence, happened with the 20-year maturity. So we're in this situation whereby, for the moment, interest rates seem to have stabilized, but it strikes us as we've got a lot of information to process within the markets over the course of the next couple months. And so don't mean to overdo this, but I think you'll see why I'm giving you this information as we flip into the next page and talk about how these different options compare to each other. Okay, so as we get to it here on page number 6, we have 4 different cases. We've labeled them A, B, C, D, hopefully for ease of reference. We've narrowed some of these down. We saw last week as we were able to strip out the notion of a taxable borrowing, so that's been helpful to us. And so what case A is if we did our $16.2 million of new money. We did that all with Sterling Bank, all the different pieces of it. We did not refund or restructure any of our existing debts. We leave our existing debt profile exactly the way it looks right now. We go down, grab the pointer here again, our max debt service to expenditures. And so this is one of the policies that we recommend we put in place. Talked about that back in February, and that'll come back. Our maximum debt service to expenditures is 5.3% on a projected basis, well within line of what we think you should be policy-wise. The max debt service, or excuse me, debt to assessed value is 1.28%, round that to about 1.3%, also well in line with where we think you should be policy-wise. And the total debt service paid over the life of your entire existing and new debt profile, that's important. This $33 million number takes into account both your existing debt, principal and interest, and the new debt you'd be taking on, principal and interest. And we're going to use that number to compare across these different cases. Would be about $33 million in that range. And then at the bottom of the page, maybe most importantly, is we look at all of this in what we call the real estate tax equivalent impact. What is the impact to our budget of making the payments on both our existing debt plus our $16.2 million of new projects? We need the equivalent of 1 penny in 2022. Take a year off. I probably did that on my end. Jeez. Take a year off, nothing in 2023, and then the equivalent of 1.5 pennies in 2024. So if you were to flip back to the February numbers, we were in the 3+ penny range. And so this, to start with, I'll kind of call this our starting case. This is about 1/2 penny better, and we purposely, as we've been working with your staff and members of your board, none of that impact comes in 2021, just knowing how difficult this budget and this economy is right now. So that would all basically be a year from now, you'd be thinking about that 1 penny impact, taking a year off and then coming back in 2024 with another 1.5 pennies. We compare that to case B, which takes into account current estimates of interest rates for the VRA summer pool and the BPSA fall pool for the school. We'll talk about why we have to have both of those programs in the mix, but it basically has to do with what the state allows each of those programs to finance. Just by statute, VPSA, which stands for the Virginia Public School Authority, can only finance school projects. That's it. They don't have the statutory ability to finance anything else aside from school projects. VRA, which is the Virginia Resources Authority, has a much broader spectrum of things that they are able to finance for a local government. But schools, especially new schools, do not generally fit in the purview of what they are able to do. We actually asked them if they could kind of fit it all in there as an option. They said, no, we really have to defer to the VPSA folks in terms of the school. So we really would end up dividing this between VRA could do our radio project, our administration center, and VPSA could do the school project. From a timing perspective, we have an application into VRA right now. It's not binding, doesn't cost anything. It's going through their credit approval process, which they do. If we wanted to move forward with VRA, we would need to do that, basically authorize it at your June 9th meeting. And they would go sell bonds on July 22nd was what they're planning. We'll talk through that in the schedule, but I think it's important to take away that the interest rates that underlie this case are all current market estimates. At the earliest, we'll know what those rates are. It's basically the end of July for VRA, which is the radio and the administration center. And then with VPSA, they don't sell their bond issue until typically, they haven't even released their schedule, but typically late October, when the interest rate would be locked in, and then money would not be available until usually the early to mid part of November. And So I think there's likely a couple issues or hurdles we'd have to work through, especially with the VPSA, that being just the length of time between now and when the interest rate gets locked in, and then also when the money is actually available to us to use on the project. We mentioned Sterling, 5 years with no penalty in terms of prepayment. VRA and VPSA, basically both the exact same thing, 10 years with no penalty, depending upon what's happening in the marketplace. So you take your eye further down, debt service to expenditures modestly different by virtue of the fact that the interest rates right now on VRA and VPSA are about 1% lower than they are with the bank. So you'll see what the impact is of that as we move down here. Debt to assessed value is a little bit different. That's just very much an estimate right now. Total debt service paid over the life of the loan. Again, this is over a 20-year time. So we use all these different sort of metrics and variables to compare the options. About 31.1 million in this environment. It's about 33 million with the bank loan. You translate that to the impact of the budget. We still need that penny in 2022. Same as with the bank loan. We still take a year off in 2023. We come back in 2024 with what looks to be, based on these market estimates, about the equivalent of 1/2 of a penny as opposed to 1.5 pennies. So there is a difference. And frankly, if we were able to lock in these rates right now, we just go ahead and do that. It just isn't the way the program works. So we have these sort of decisions to make and work through, and we'll talk through all that. But I think, again, the fact that we won't know with VRA until late July what the interest rate is, and then VPSA until basically we think October, late October, what the interest rate is, those really give us some pause, especially given what's going on in the marketplace. Go one more page for me. Okay, so those are our, back one page if you don't mind. Thank you. So those are our kind of, what we call our starting cases. All we're doing, I say all, in those is financing the new money capital projects. We're getting, in essence, a loan or loans for 16.2 million of new projects to include school, the radio, and the administration center, and just layering that strategically, but layering it on top of our existing debt profile. So what we do on page 7 is we get to case C and case D. And in case C and case D, what we asked the banks to do, and we ran some of this back in the February numbers. And at that time, the world looked a whole lot different in terms of budgets and the economy. We said, what would it look like if we not only financed the new money capital projects, but what if we looked at our existing outstanding debt, which really amounts to about 2 loans, or is 2 loans, the 2013 and 2017 bond we previously referenced. What if we looked at those and gave ourselves the ability to flatten the payments out on those loans, give us a little more time to pay on them? So I think what we found as we looked at those is they financed construction of buildings, long-lived assets, and they were paid over a pretty short time period. And so while that is good on the one hand, in the sense that you're getting the loan paid off faster, the debt paid off faster, I think what we've heard and what we've observed as we've worked with you over the last couple months is that we have in Madison County not just capital projects to take care of, we also have operational needs. We have other things we need to take care of in terms of rolling stock, other operational needs. And so what we see here with the refunding of the 2017 and 2013 loans is an ability to, I'm going to use a personal finance corollary. They're not always perfect, but I think you could make the case that right now you have something like a 15-year mortgage on your house, which in one sense may feel good in the sense that we're going to pay it off quicker and we're going to pay less interest because of it. But what we've observed and heard as we've talked and looked at your budgets is we're having trouble cash flowing the roof repairs and the HVAC repairs, the other things that are necessary to keep that house up and running and maintain its value and make sure it's usable for you. So I'm not sure it's a perfect corollary, but that's maybe one way to think about it. And I think a way to think about the refunding of these 2017 and 2013 loans is giving yourself more like a 20-year mortgage, not even a 30-year mortgage, but giving yourself a 20-year mortgage and thus freeing up some capacity, some cash flow within, again, using personal finance within your monthly income, using county finance within your overall budget to make sure that you can start to take care of some of those pent-up needs, whether it's on the capital side, the operational side, and at the same time minimize the impact to the budget, to the tax rate, and ultimately to the taxpayer as you work through that. And so what that would look like, and we've got some visuals here, I think some visuals will help as well, but just in terms of numbers, our maximum debt service to expenditures is 4.7%. So that is purposely lower because we've lowered the overall debt service that would be coming out of your budget. Debt to assessed value is in essence in the same place, about 1.3%. The total debt service paid over the life of your existing and new loans would be about $34.4 million, around there a little bit. And so you compare that to case A, that's sort of the apples to apples comparison. In case A, we're at about 33 million. Case B here, we're about 34.4 in terms of the total debt service paid over the entire life, 20 years of your debt profile. On a present value basis, if you take the difference in those payments and factor in the fact they are paid over the life, basically over a 20-year time period, that difference is about $350,000. But I think that's an important consideration, one we think about a lot, because it's not just the aggregate amount of payments you make over the life of a loan, it's the timing of those payments. I think what we're trying to work here is how do we time those payments responsibly such that they fit within your budget, don't have an outsized impact on your taxpayer, while at the same time we're able to keep ourselves within financial policy best practices, have fixed interest rates, and have those be market-based interest rates. And so if you take your eye down, say, all right, after you run all that through the numbers, what does it look like in terms of that real estate tax equivalent impact? 2022, we have that 1 penny equivalent impact. 2023, 0. 2024, it's 0. So in essence, by working in the refunding of the 13s and the 17s with the new money, we're able to work that overall impact down such that if you have the equivalent of 1 penny in next year's budget, not this year's budget, next year's budget, that would take care of these needs, meaning basically the large capital side of things. It doesn't necessarily take care of everything. We know there's other challenges, but it takes care of the big projects that you're dealing with right now. You take your eye to the right here in terms of case D, VRA, VPSA, would run down a little bit quicker. But again, interest rates right now are lower with those. And you could likely, if rates were to hold, you'd probably be at a ½ penny or the equivalent thereof in 2022. And then again, the same, no need for anything in 23 and no need for anything in 24. And so in summary, all of these options let you fit within financial best practices. They let you fit within recommended financial policies. All of those things that we talked about back in February and the last couple months. So what we really have here is sterling that we would like to, we kind of refer to that as a bird in hand, right? So if you've gone out and you're hunting, you've got the bird in hand in scenarios A and C. You know what that interest rate is. We can work through that with a couple caveats. We'll talk about the bank still has to go through some final credit approval. We need to work to get the right collateral structure for them. I think all of those things are very doable. I'd be surprised if they weren't. And so we have the bird in hand in terms of the Sterling Bank, or we have the proverbial two in the bush with the VRA and the VPSA. And the difference there being, it's about a 1% difference in interest rate between where Sterling is right now and where VRA, VPSA are. I know there was some discussion, which we think is feasible to the extent the board wanted to do this, at letting this play out a little bit and having both of these options available as we work over the course of the next couple of weeks. We'll talk about the next steps coming back on June 9th for more formal action. We don't need formal action from you today. Sort of a proverbial head nod, a sort of direction from the board is really what we need tonight to keep moving. We don't need a firm, formal resolution or anything of that variety passed. And so I think it might be, Jack, I might just point to these pages just to give a couple of visuals to go with some of this. Knowing our clicker's not functioning quite as well as we'd like it. So Jack, if you wouldn't mind going to page 11, bottom right-hand side. Perfect. Maybe just to give a little bit of a visual in terms of how these different pieces all add together. So what page 11 is showing is case A, which is the case where we leave our existing debt alone. We just finance our new money projects, and this is all for the moment with Sterling Bank. So if you look at this graph over here, the dark bars, this is a green color, hard to see on the screen. That is your existing debt service. It pays out, it's basically done in 2028. A little bit of decline from 22 to 23, and it really goes away in 2028. Level is about level there. And then we layer on top of that the different colors here, the radio project in the tan, school project in the green, the administration center in the blue. So visually what you see, you layer all these different pieces together, we go from about 1.5 million, it's about 1.4 sort of visual, go from about 1.5 million in debt service up to about 1.9 million using round numbers over the course of 21 and 22. And so from a budgetary standpoint, that's why we end up with a 2.5 penny impact. So we basically have to step our way up in the budget from about 1.4 up to about, that's about 1.8 to 1.9 and kind of maintain that level out through 2028. So that's what that visually looks like if we don't do the refunding and we do the Sterling Bank option. So Jack, if I could trouble you to go to page 15. I'm happy to walk through any of the rest of these details, but I thought these visuals might be helpful. This is the same scenario, but instead of bank loan, we use VRA and VPSA. I think what you should see from a shape perspective is, in essence, same shape. Instead of ending up at about 1.9 million, we end up at about 1.85 in terms of maximum, 1.82. It is 1.85 in terms of the maximum in terms of that payment. But same basic shape where we end up kind of stepping our way up from 20 to 21 to 22, kind of have this plateau, then have some decline out here in 28 and 29. So if you can kind of hold that visual in your mind, and Jack, maybe go to page 21 if you don't mind. So here on page 21, what this is doing is these dark green bars, they no longer stop here in 2028. They're also at a much lower level than they used to be. So visually, we've basically taken what used to be up here we've sliced it off and we've appended it back here from 29 out to 33. So we've given ourselves about 4 more years to pay on those loans. The average interest rate on those loans as we sit here right now, adding the two together, is about 2.2%. With the Sterling Bank bids, you'd be at about the 2.4% range after you did the refunding. So you're in and around a relative order of magnitude, same interest rate. You do go from a 2.20 interest rate to about a 2.4 on average. And you give yourself 29, 30 out to 33, a little more time to flatten that out, fit it into the budget. And so as you look at the shape of that, you've gone from same 1.4 million, that bar is in exactly the same place. We actually dropped down a fair amount in 2021. That freed up cash flow helps put some more dollars in reserve. And then our peak debt service, instead of being in the $1.8, $1.9 million range, is now about 1.7 even over that time period out to about 2033. So the hill you've got to climb is less steep if indeed the refunding is factored in, and thus the impact of the tax rate over the next 3 years is less severe, if indeed that is what you would elect to do. I think importantly then, that debt service structure is purposely flat thereafter. So there's no spikes, there's no balloon payments. It is purposely flat thereafter, so that from a budgeting perspective, a financial management perspective, there's no surprises in the future. Again, talking about fixed interest rates, these loans basically look a whole lot like a mortgage in terms of a fixed rate, make an annual payment, and they all fit together in such a way as we try to make it as level as possible. So I thought those visuals might hopefully be a little helpful, Mr. Chairman and others, as we talk through what is the difference between including the refundings and not including the refundings. So if we go back to page 8, then I'd be happy to answer any and all questions that you have. And if we can't answer them, we'll come back to you. One more page, if you don't mind, Jack. So what would our next steps look like? So we're here tonight, May 26th. Again, this is what I'll call informational. We don't need a formal resolution adopted by the board this evening, but certainly we're hopeful to have some direction going forward. So what we would need if you wanted to move forward is at your June 9th meeting, we could have basically the legal documents put together. Sands Anderson is your bond counsel, and working with them, your staff, we could have the various things put together so that you'd have resolutions to adopt come that June 9th meeting, which is in a couple weeks here. Over the course of that time period, we do a couple things. We would seek to get final credit approval from Sterling Bank. We don't think that will be a problem, but certainly we don't count our chickens before they hatch. We would seek to get final credit approval from VRA to the extent we want to keep that option available to us. They have a credit approval process they work through. It's very similar to a bank. And we work through that between now and basically your June 9th meeting so that at that meeting you have the resolutions to adopt. A couple important other deadlines and why this June meeting is important. The 19th is the deadline for local action, meaning Board of Supervisors, in your case, action to be within the summer VRA pool, which is the next available pool, and the one we've applied to. And so that June 9th meeting is, we understand it, your last meeting before that 19th deadline. So that's, again, why one of our deadlines here is for June 9th. If we were to move forward with a direct bank loan, that would flow through just the legal construct in Virginia. We'd need a meeting of your IDA to be scheduled after the Board of Supervisors meeting your body would approve something. So the IDA would have to approve this. We would also need to make it to a school board meeting. This will be the case whether we work with either a bank or VRA as a school, probably multiple schools, will end up serving as collateral for the loan. We move to the bottom of the page here. If indeed we were to move forward with Sterling Bank, they have held their rates in their proposal through June 26th. As long as we basically let them know they're kind of in the mix between now and then. So we really have until June 26th with the bank to have all of your approvals done and close. And then if we go one more page, talked again. VRA is scheduled for July 22nd in terms of their sale. That's when their interest rate's locked in. We won't know what the rate is until then. It will be really up to the marketplace to determine what that rate is between now and July. If indeed we move forward with VRA, we would have our money for the radio project in the administration center, administration renovations, August 5th. That's when we'd actually receive the dollars for those projects. And then lastly, to the extent we move forward with VPSA for the school, which we're really not recommending for this, it's a ways out just given the cash flows. The application, in fact, would be in the summertime, month of October, the rate would be locked in, close then in November. And I think on the school especially, that seems to us to be a long way away when you think about the economy, interest rates, but also just the need to have dollars to spend on the school project itself, given where you're in the project. So with that, Mr. Chairman or others, that's a lot of information, I realize, in a short time period, and I'm happy to again, answer any questions, offer any clarification that we can, get any other details that you may need prior to your June 9th meeting.
Cardi, you're probably most organized as far as the questions. Go ahead, Cardi.
Let's see.
Well, for everybody else's edification, we got together, Kyle, Clay, myself, MJ, Jack, and one other person from Davenport this past Friday, and talked through a lot of this. One of the big issues was, and we were all disappointed. I think Kyle and Davenport was disappointed that we didn't get more bids back from the banks. He explained that to us Friday, and he explained it to us again tonight about the banks probably dealing with the CARES Act. Now, I looked at it a little differently. I was in the defense contracting business for 30 years. We got, 3 quotes. I asked Davenport, we got a number of no bids, which in the defense contracting business was a response. We do have the input from key government finance, which if you look at the parts that they did bid on, they were slightly higher than Sterling. So I feel comfortable that I could extrapolate and say if they had a bid on the other stuff, it would be probably slightly higher than what Sterling is. So I'm comfortable now. I feel like I can look people in the eye and say that we've done our due diligence. Davenport has done their due diligence on getting these bids in here. VRA and VPSA, as Kyle has said, there's some volatility in there. The rates are currently lower, but the rates that Sterling National Bank has provided us, I think, are good rates. And I mean, just today, coming in, I mean, the Dow went up 500 points today, and tomorrow it wouldn't surprise me if it went down 750 points. I mean, it's just all over the map. And I trust that Davenport and Kyle in particular are concerned about that volatility, and I am too. So I poured over this stuff, and I was looking at KC here because I didn't go straight to the bottom line now and looked at it was only a penny because there's certain other factors. KC buys us more time. I don't know that I've ever talked to somebody that had a 15-year mortgage and decided to go to a 20-year, but that's exactly what I was thinking about at home today, because maybe my hours got cut or I lost my job and I want to stay in my house and I got to do what I got to do. So it buys us some time at a very good rate. The current rates on the 2017 and 2013 are 2.39 and 2.15% respectively.
Yes, sir.
So that is just a tad lower. And I think the advantage of being able to spread this out, trumps that right now. Now, what I do want to know, Kyle, is look at KC. You've got the estimated total debt service of $34,394,037. That's on page 5, Jack. That's 13. Yeah, go way back. Oops, oh, the old page 5. Sorry, this was yesterday's page 5.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, one
page
more.
7, page
One
7.
more. Page 7.
Yep, yes, sir.
That 34,394,037, does that include fees? I mean, I think I recall some correspondence from Davenport saying to process the refunding would be a $15,000 fee for y'all's effort on that part. Does this 34,394 include stuff like that and whatever the bond counsel and it might be? It does.
So yeah, that 34,394 is intended to be all inclusive. So our costs, lawyers' costs, Sands Anderson's cost, the bank counsel in this instance would be rolled in there. That is all inclusive. There's nothing else
Okay.
sort of associated.
All right, that was one of my big questions. And I noticed the bid summary we got from Sterling Bank on the 22nd had bank and legal fees not to exceed 10,000, but now that's gone.
No, that's still there. I think
It just wasn't on.
yeah, we
Okay.
shrunk this one down for ease.
So I thought maybe you got them to come down on the years that we had to, before we could pay it off, and maybe got rid of that too. Let's see. So I guess this question here, a lot of this does depend on our debt stabilization fund, right, to make these numbers work. So are we in fact going to start out FY21 with $1,250,000 in the debt stabilization fee that'll make this stuff work? We are, okay. I mean, when going through the budget process, I don't remember, maybe just went right over my head. I don't remember us making a provision for that, but okay.
It's not in the budget, it's in the fund balance.
Okay.
Because that's where it's coming.
But we don't have a formal debt stabilization fund right today, but we're
No,
going
but
to.
It's a reserve of general fund balance.
Okay, so we've got that. So that makes these numbers work in my mind.
I was gonna.
So we're going to draw down on that debt. Even on KC, we're going to draw down on the debt stabilization fund for 6-7 years, maybe, I think. Is that what it was, Kyle?
Yeah, Jack, if you went to page 23,
23,
you
yeah.
kind of see how that works. Sorry, we're making Jack jump all over the place.
There you go. Whoops.
So
Yes, so.
Yeah, so this is a
slide
breakout, a
back.
whole lot of cash flows here, but basically we start with $1.2 million.
Yeah,
And then if we did indeed do the refunding, free up some dollars here in terms of 371,000 that we could put there. We could frankly go somewhere else.
right.
And then we use that to the tune of about 60 to 90,000.
And we started eating into it.
Yeah. And we didn't do it over that time period. Also, we've got a couple dollars in there as well, sort of in reserve. So there's a little contingency in there.
Right. So, so according to the next step, so we've only got 14 days, right, between now and June the 9th. So I feel like that we need to recommend a path to Davenport this evening, so that, 14 days, I don't know how much you got to prepare between now and June 9th.
We need to do, what it appears, we need to do a general head nod tonight, and then a formal adoption.
Right.
As long as our direction doesn't change with some type of complete anomaly, which is prone to happen nowadays. We'll see how we come back to your recommendation. And my direction is with the city and stay away, so stick with 3% instead of go with the PTA or the BRA and the PPSA, which had some uncertainty about what. That's just kind of what it is. Who else has a question? Hobbs has got a bunch of questions.
No comment questions, but maybe I have a different way of looking at this. All this is, everything is combined, and what you find when you go through a lot of this is that the different financings apply to different projects. We have 3 different distinct projects, 2 different pieces of existing debt. Finance. Not all financing buildings apply to each piece. So, one of the things I need to relate or get a sense of from the board this evening is tolerance for this. I will tell you, we've got this bird in hand with 50% for finance everything, that's fine. The problem is, come June 19, that we have to opt either whether to take that and stay with that, or give some or all of it to these other programs. And so, the issue there is that you don't know what your rate will be until July. So let's stick with the banks or step away from the banks, or wholly or partially. It compounds itself if you talk about the school financing program, because that only will finance the school project and nothing else. I'm not sure whether it will serve for refinancing some of those debts. But the problem there is we won't know those rates until October. So, I suppose a bit more with that, but you have to say about that is, who knows what's going to happen between now and October, and certainly we need to finance that school budget. So that's along those out. So I think the sense I get from the community is that we don't have that much challenge for that amount of time and make it. If that's the case, the school financing program is off the table, which forces you into the bank financing for the school project. That makes sense. The resources for the bank finance that. So it's a decision on getting these things apart. If you want to finance the school project, the financing, you have to wait until October to find out what rates are. And that's unacceptable. So decisions made to go to the bank. Is that clear? For that piece.
Yes.
So for the radio project and the county administration project, the idea there is that you do have some sort of rates will not be known until the end of July for the VRA. So I guess that's a fair question. Are you comfortable with that contingency, or would you like the bird in hand for the 3% fixed for these So there's that, like a month with a rate risk there, suffering, because again, you have to bail out of the bank and there's the BRA will do that.
That is a fair assessment.
So it's a rate risk tolerance question. Again, dealing off the financing, refinancing of existing debt, the issue there is that we want to talk about how many pennies there are on the tax rate and doubling our debt service and all this. Problem is that comes at a cost. And if you look at the total payments on the existing debt between these four options, I think it would be the dealing with because it is significant. The amount of money, that total amount of money can I do to pay back on those existing debts, which is what you have committed to. So it's not insignificant. We can walk through that. That's
Between A and C, you're talking $1.372 million difference.
so
But
that's
that'll never play out. We'll never get there. Something will happen. We will have more capital expenditures
Refinancing.
to refinance and stuff. I mean, and I did that when I was 22 years old. I took out a 30-year mortgage. I mean, I did the numbers like, I'm going to have to pay, $30,000 more in interest. But I figured, no, my career is going to go somewhere, which I guess it never did. Look at me now. But so I did what I could afford at that time, knowing that I was going to pay that thing off, and we got that 5-year thing in there. So I mean, I'm just inclined to recommend that that Davenport go with C, case C, and go that route. I just, not being able to get rates until July 22nd for BRA and October for BHSA is just, yeah.
Things are changing on such a rapid pace. I mean, are interest rates going to go up over the next 2 weeks? Probably not. The grand scheme of things, it could. And this is with other people's money. It is mitigation risk. That's our whole job here completely is mitigation risk. Sometimes we're good at it, sometimes we're not. MJ, what do you have to say?
Yeah.
Well, to me, it's all about action. It is true that the life alone for C is $7 million more. But what I'm most concerned about is getting your entire budget. Your debt service is part of your own. I'm concerned about we're getting a balanced budget in the next 4 to 5 years. It's not just the debt, as I write down Friday, it's a lot of other things that we know about. And it is true, if you refinance the existing debt, the rates are slightly higher than what they are right now, but the benefit of that is that you don't have as much pressure on the tax rates for the next 20 years. And that to me is,
That's strange.
well, that's my biggest single concern right now is that we're going budgeted a deficit in 2020, budgeted a deficit in 2021. And outside of that, exclusive of whatever you do with capital projects, you have other operating commitments that will increase your annual budget. So,
Absolutely.
and there's not, in my opinion, at least for the next 18 months, I don't think you have much of seeing net increases in revenues. But that's just, I'm pessimistic. So I'm conservative too. I like conservative options, and I think that C is conservative.
Okay, one more thing, then I'll shut up. So we're talking about you're talking about the difference in the total debt service. But I think, Kyle, you said that the present value impact between A and C was only like 350,000.
That is
So,
correct.
Okay, so anyhow, that's all I
We
got.
could show that on page 20 if you want to see it. That could back up 2 slides. So what page 20 is showing us is simply isolating the existing debt from a funding portion of it. And let's do it visually. So what you have right now is basically this line right here. And what you would have afterwards is this set of green bars that gets flattened out. So again, there's $1 million here in terms of payments, but present value of that back, it's not just the aggregate amount, it's the timing of those dollars, when they occur within the life cycle of your budgets. That's what a present value calculation does. It recognizes that $1 today is worth more than $1 in this case, 13 years. So the present value of that is $350,000. So a longer-winded way of saying what Mr. Gallo just said is that the present value cost is $350,000.
There you go. Also, just for just general clarity, for everybody that got this, MJ made the point on Friday at the phone call. The projected 1 penny increase, or one and then skip a year, 1.5, or whatever, however long, that is just for debt service. Just for debt service. So there's increased. Brian, what's your service contract going up to with this new 911 system? Okay. There you go. That's what we're going to need. There's some other costs that go in there involved that are going to be expensive. Just we know it's coming. So. All right.
Just estimate, like, when you think that's-
What do y'all think? If you all want to go with C on Sterling, if you got something else, let us know. I mean, I'm looking.
I'm with, less uncertainty and, just, in the absence of compelling reason to do something else, I think it's.
The only one I asked Hobbs while we were going through this, what our interest rates were on the 2017 bond and 2013 bond. Currently on the 2017 bond, we're at 2.39. The Sterling has us drop down to 2.37, which is actually a little bit of savings. But the 2013 bond, we have at 2.15%, and it's going to go to 2.39. So, I mean, there is increased cost there. There should be some apprehension with refinancing going up. Wrong way to look at it, but it is that cash flow side. Potentially, we could help ease MJ's mind if we can help on cash flow. Before this stuff. We good on C? C.
It's, what are the refinancing addition debt?
We appreciate it. I think what we will do on our end, working with Sands Anderson and Jack and MJ and others, is work through getting the final T's crossed and I's dotted, as Ms. Yala mentioned, over the next 14 days. The bank has to do their final credit approvals. We'll do a little information sharing on them in terms of collateral. We will aim to have that all wrapped up for your June 9th meeting. If we have any open items, you'll know it ahead of time. But we'll work judiciously over the next 2 weeks to get all that aligned for June 9th.
Before you leave, the schedule on that is the bids you got, this will all close by the end of June. Is that?
That's correct. June 26th is when they have held their bids, meaning when Sterling held their bid through. And so the other logistical things we'll need to do is make sure we can get to the IDA and school board for ideally really between that June 9th and June 26th, if we're able to do that.
one meeting procedure, is that the way this works?
Yeah, for both, and we'll confirm this with Sands Anderson, but for both the IDA, it'll be a one meeting, unless you want to do it informational ahead of time, we could do that. But for purposes of action, one meeting at the IDA, and should be one meeting at the school board as well.
That's just the approval of being able to use the two schools as collateral.
On the school board side, that's correct.
Right.
And the IDA is really a function of kind of the legal structure of Virginia, how these lease revenue bonds work. So for purposes of that meeting, they serve as a legal conduit because they're a body politic that has certain powers that are a little different from yours, but from a financial liability standpoint, to use that's quite the right term, but everything flows through to the county. So it's not the IDA's loan per se, in the sense that they're not liable as a body, they're not liable as individuals. We'll explain all that to them with the lawyers as well. It really is a legal pass-through, to use that term. That's just the legal structure of how it's done in Virginia. So just as reference.
And before we go in front of the, or before y'all go in front of the school board, you're going to get them all that information prior to the meeting.
Correct.
Good.
Yeah, following this, we'll end up with Jack and MJ and the various legal parties, making sure we've got all the dominoes lined up.
Good. All right. Hobbs has on here to ask about the 5-year forecast.
Yeah.
How's that going? Is it going well? Is it maybe next meeting? I mean, we haven't given you that.
We've got it on our radar. Next meeting may be aggressive because we really need the final numbers from the 21 budget in order to do that. I think, unless I have that, MJ, and I don't realize it.
How's that coming? So sort of, we're going with sort of. So what?
Probably unlikely for June 9th, but as soon as we've got numbers. I would say, Mr. Chairman, if it's possible to push that to another meeting in June, it'd be helpful. With respect.
Late June, July, that'd be very good. MJ, sound reasonable? June, July?
At this point, it's useful information, but it's not driving any of these decisions, right?
I agree.
I mean, the budget's
Well, we
done,
paid
the tax
that for
rates
them.
are set, and figure out that, so it's a planning tool in the future, but we're using it as higher priority.
We'll see you in July. Looking forward to it.
As am I.
There you go. All right. Kyle, anything else for us? Anybody else got anything for Kyle? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We really appreciate the time.
All right, we're taking, well, we go ahead and do public comment and stuff? I don't think so. Let's do some public comment. Is that where we're at now? Yeah, public comment. Public comment. How you doing back there, Livingston? Lots of public comment? People jumping out of their seats?
Yeah, they're all hollering for you, Clay.
Good to see Mr. Mitch.
Yes, sir. I'd love to have some public comment.
And got anything good for us, Mr. Mitch?
Yes, sir, I do. Yes, sir.
All right.
I've got a brief update for you.
Sure.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For those who don't know me, I'm Gary Mish, Secretary of Madison Community Cats. To the best of my knowledge, we're the only trap, neuter, return, and kitten rescue group working in Madison County full time. We do spend a little bit of our time in Culpeper County, but it's well served by other groups. So far in 2020, we have trapped and otherwise received 169 Madison cats, and every one of them have been spayed, neutered, vaccinated, and returned to their owners or colonies. We're currently assisting citizens in managing 19 colonies in Madison County. Most every one of those colonies have been sterilized. Some of them are still in the process of being sterilized with their caretakers. And this service has been free to county residents, though some of those county residents have been very generous with donations to offset our operating expenses. which are about $60 a cat to include vaccinations. Now, the lack of public events has made it difficult to raise funds by traditional methods, but we have received some grants. For example, Give Local Piedmont. We've rescued 32 Madison County kittens, many of which are on their way to adoption. 18 are still in our foster care, and there are 10 on our waiting list for foster care and subsequent adoption. And I'd like to thank you very much for the opportunity to give you an update on our activities, and I hope to be able to do so again very soon, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mitch. Well, we got some public comment. Heck, we'll take anything. Anybody else? All right, moving on. Nothing on the Vimeo. Super disappointed in that. All right, consent agenda. We've got the May 12th meeting, 2020. I think April was absent. Is that correct? Here. Yes or no? April here?
Yeah.
All right, what?
Yep.
Amber, sorry. I ate close. Sorry, Amber. Was Amber here? I apologize.
Oh, it's here.
All right, and then we've got the supplemental appropriation on the security system. Okay. We heard about that last week. What's the pleasure?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion made, second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Constitutional officers. Brian Daniels says he doesn't have anything. We don't have any. Clarissa Berry, anything to add? Ms. Murray? Taking that as no. All right, now we're going to county departments. We have some county department people here. John Shearer, you're on that side. Start here.
Okay, well, I guess we'll start with the numbers like everybody else. Everybody looks at the BDH dashboard. Looks like we're looking at close to 40,000 cases in the Commonwealth of COVID positive people. 4,325 are in the hospital and 1,236 people have died. That's in the Commonwealth. Here in Madison, 37 cases, according to BDH, 3 in the hospital and 1 fatality. And that hasn't changed from last time. So that's a good thing. The governor talked today. The rates of infection are going down, and that's a positive thing. And he's looking like phase 2 will go on as. A couple things he did mention. It looks like he's going to be looking at face masks for everybody in public places and businesses and all that. They don't have to be medical grade, but talk about face masks, some sort of face covering to eliminate or at least slow the spread down. We continually, we're just committed to protecting our most vulnerable people, with underlying health conditions and elderly stuff like that. Because the people that are suffering most from this virus is working to follow BDH guidelines and people wear PPE and should be something to look tomorrow, I expect. Other than that, every day, constant communication with BDH. And I can answer any questions you want. The numbers, we can sit there and beat these numbers up all day long. They are what they are. I know that they're trying to go as much data as they can and get calculated, look at it, but this is, not 100% confident with that. The only one I guess we could really go by is the fatalities. But you can put a hard number on those. But if you give me 33 cases this week, how many of those people have recovered and gone on about their life? The virus, it can affect each of us so differently. One is devastating, the other one doesn't even know they have symptoms. So it's all over the map. There's still way more questions than there is answers. But I can try to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for John Shearer? He's hardly been thinking about this. Hardly been thinking about it.
It's just to see a treasure trove of information you're trying to read through, and it it changes every day. You used to be able to not get it from your dog, now possibility you can get it. You know, they just keep throwing that in.
That dog is not gonna wear a mask. He would eat that mask.
I mean, the other thing is if you've seen the guidelines that come out with schools.
Yeah.
Have you looked at that?
It seems great. I mean, some genius PhD came up with that.
I'm just not so sure how that you're gonna be able to make that go, but I guess that's why they call them guidelines. And,
We're all saying
anyway, that's it for me.
Noah,
Working closely with John.
so, things going well? Ryan?
It's doing good, it's just in good progress, good news today, good news late last week, so been promising. Metrics, another one, same thing. Should be, CPE upgrade probably will be done by the end of July. Going to slow that down a little bit. Texas 911 should be done.
Roger?
Courthouse glass should be installed on Thursday. So we should be finished with that project on Thursday, and then, Clark's gotta come in and put the door hardware on, lock doors and everything, but other than that, should be done this week.
All right. Okay, we've gone through the whole back of the row. Steve, you got anything to say? Any general comments?
If the governor's worried about people dying, it'll stop 168,000 abortions and lock the liquor stores up.
Yeah, I asked. Livingston?
You already know about it.
I do. Everything going well? All right, we covered everybody. Anybody else got anything on?
I'm in person.
Tracy.
Still.
Tracy is here. I see her over there. I think we can talk about you, but no, I'll come to you. Tracy, you're up.
Well, what I had was,
See you.
I was hoping for a phase 2 announcement today, but we didn't get that. The mask thing's supposed to start on Friday, by the way. So my report was literally my plans for when we do open up the visitor center. And it's basically that mask. We'll have a royal blue highway for people to stay on. Don't touch anything. We'll get it for you with gloves. And our unemployment numbers always come after I send my report. As of the 16th, we had 601 unemployment claims
In that.
in Madison.
Thank you.
And I've got like 5 different grants through Central Virginia Partnership for many different things,
Great. Anything else?
all recovery related. That's all for now.
What is our workforce size? 601 is what? Out of how many?
That's a good question. Because these people,
4,500?
Yeah, it's gotta be something.
All right.
that number I don't have. I can give you comparisons. Green has 1,300 unemployed claims. That tells you anything.
Amber's gonna look it up.
Do you have it?
No, but yeah.
All right, you got anything else? Well, Amber's looking at some on April. We're going to MJ. MJ, you got anything?
So there's 2 things that I want to talk about. The first is the CARES Act, $1 million+ that we're about to get. Of course, we can use that for reimbursements of specific costs, but there are a lot of other possibilities that you can use that money for, which include supporting local nonprofits, providing money to the town, providing money to the school board, providing money to social services. And we don't really have any, and it's not just for costs, like sanitizing, things like that. It can also be, measures put in place to improve social distancing, measures put in place to facilitate remote working. We have this issue with ambulances right now. I talked to, just as an example, I talked to.
Speak loud, MJ. People are
I
saying
talked
they
to
can't hear you.
both Lauren Eads and social services, and they both have ideas about physical improvements that they can make before December, barn and would be in polling places. And it's social services would like be in their lobby. So the problem is we don't have any way of aggregating these costs and then deciding whether we want to do that. I was also talking to Tracy today because there's other possibilities where you can create economic assistance programs. I don't know whether we have the structure to do that because my understanding is that the counties that are doing this are primarily doing it through an EDA, and we have an EDA, we have an IDA. I don't understand that. But I guess there's so many different options that we have with this money, and it shouldn't be looked at as, okay, so what do we need to, PPE and sanitizing stuff and hours. There's lots of other things you can spend that money on. So eventually, and at this point, I don't really have my hands around that, but we're gonna have to, I hate to give up $1 million. So if there's things that we can legitimately use that money for, we should give thought to, what processes are going to be in place for what those allocations are. As an example, John provided this to us last week, where Loudon got $35 million, and they already have a punch list of how they're going to spend it.
Well, we're the government, we're gonna spend that $1 million.
But we can't, PPE and sanitizers don't add up to $1 million. That's, and respirators, ambulances, but the issue with the ambulances are, first of all, we don't know yet. And I'm trying to get it,
Do we have guidelines set up or strings that are attached to this in some
So,
type of way?
I think, certainly before I would tell the county to go out and spend $500 million on ambulances, we need some better guidance from the state. There are some phone numbers that I found related to this stuff. I have not been able to pursue this. And I know on Noah's side, he's got the other issue where if he can't do this, then he wants to try to get financing in place, and he wants to do that sooner or later. So we need to make some of these decisions.
What was the date that they're gonna deliver this $1 million? Isn't it June 17th?
Soon.
June 1st.
Yeah. So that's another thing where they're saying it has to be spent, but the federal, the rules are kind of, I'm not sure whether it's spent or whether that means actually cash out the door, or whether it just means if you have a legal obligation, it's kind of like if you sign a contract and it's not done, you might be able to get around that limitation. I would like to ask them that.
Those guidelines are so great.
Is it,
You looked at them.
yeah, there's just not a whole lot there right now to understand this stuff. So, one of the things I want to try to focus on soon, but I can tell you it's not going to be this week, is trying to find some resources that can help us answer some of these questions. Because we just don't, we don't know. The other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was the replacement ERP system, enterprise resource planning system. So I just wanted to tell you that we closed our question period. We've done 2 addendums to the RFP. They're all, and now we're waiting for responses. The due dates on responses are June 3rd. And Think IT has proposed a structure so that by the end of June, we have, the first step is for them to take the responses and basically come up with a grading system and shortlist them. And then we, the county, looks at them and we develop a list of people that we actually want to see demos on. All of that theoretically is going to happen before the end of June, so that by early to mid-July, we would have our final selections. The Think IT contract is for the evaluation and selection portion of the contract specifies that they will negotiate the licensing agreements with whatever we select. But then, of course, they have to go through the county attorney's review. So it's important that we, Sean, I'm giving you a heads up, that they're coming, expect to see them late July, and the faster they get turned around, the better. Now, I've also asked the IT, in terms of implementation, can we get, if there's a delay on getting those licensing agreements finalized, are there things that we can do with the implementation to get it started? I had this conversation this morning, and there definitely are, but before they can do too much related to that, they need to know what our final choices are. They need to know the software choices. So we all had a meeting, the IT working group had a meeting on Thursday, and what came out of that is we awarded the last contract to Think IT on a sole source basis, and we decided that that's still a legitimate thing to do for the implementation. There's currently $75,000 in the capital budget for FY21 for an implementation contract. So I had this, and the issue there is going to be, and there was a conversation about this too, there's kind of competing interests there, which is, the county wants to save as much money as possible, and they want to make sure that we utilize staff and don't charge the services of $250 consultants when we don't need to. But we also don't want to shortchange ourselves and not provide us with the needed support that we have to have if it's done in a really pretty compressed time frame. So one of the things that was proposed, and I'm hoping that I can bring it to you before I actually bring a contract for the implementation portion of this project to you, is I'd asked them to come up with a schedule by function with time. Here's the on a granular basis in terms of tasks involved. Here's what we need to do here. Here's how much time it's going to take. Here's where we think county staff can participate. Here's where we think we need to be, and that would support whatever their final contract price is. Because I basically told them we can't sign a $75,000 contract with you without some significant amount of detail. So that's where I left it with them today, and he seemed to think that he could get that done and have it to us so that the board can look at it at the next meeting. And I would prefer you to do that before before I bring you a contract and you say it's too much money. I don't want to. You need to have some basis for understanding what's in those numbers. So,
When's y'all's next meeting? When's the next IT working group?
I'm not sure we have an IT working group. We have something on the 10th, I think, tentative. And also, I think IT is working on our recap of everything that's discussed last Thursday. Tentatively, there's a meeting on schedule for June 10th where we would do the initial shortlist. And then there would be another meeting scheduled for the end of the year to look for whatever we shortlist, to look at demos on those items that are yeah, so we are making progress. We did slip a little bit, but they are saying they still don't think that it's going to be a problem for us to get done. There's another piece of news, which is we may not have to do this, flip the switch on 7/1/2021. We may be able to do some of this I don't know what I'm missing here, but over time. So like, for instance, maybe building and zoning can get their application in 3 to 4 months. Right now, I anticipate the biggest problem being with the commissioner of revenue and the treasurer, because they've got data problems. They've got data cleanup problems that they're going to spend a lot of time on before they can go on. So, in terms of like what my department does, we may have more functions. We do procurement, we do payables, we do financials, we do budgeting, we do HR, we do payroll, we do all those things, processing things in my department. But from a data point of view, our data is in much better shape than constitutional officers. So that's all
That
I'm saying.
conversion will be a little more challenging.
Yeah, now he did, Clay did suggest, that, because there's gonna be another staff person from, I think, IT involved in this. He actually is going on family leave for a month in July, so there's gonna still be people, and Jim Holman is gonna take over. But there is gonna be another staff person assigned to this, but he did suggest, if we wanna go, that might be a cheaper alternative, is that we might wanna go out of house through like a temp agency to find somebody that can do this, that isn't in their billing rate range. I actually am not fond of that idea. That's why originally I put $20,000 in the budget for overtime. I do believe that if you offer to pay the county staff and the treasurer's office, commissioner, my office, that they will work. They will work the hours if you pay them time and a half. I don't think they will be willing to do that if you're just going to give them comps. That's just that's why I wanted that money in the budget. There's only 10 right now. I have to tell you that based on what things IT comes up with, I might come back to you and say, I need some more money. And that would be a lot cheaper than anything IT would do the same thing.
Are they building us out? Are they building us out?
If they're billing us, it's another thing I want to see is how they price this next project out, but what they've been doing so far is billing at a blended rate of $250. Yeah. So at $250 an hour, I have to say that the bills that Think IT sends to us are really, really detailed. They send a bill, a monthly bill, and that's just hours times rate, and then they send a supporting schedule by day of everything they do. So I have confidence that they're not overdoing us. But it's a real issue, that you don't want. There's two issues. One, you don't want to pay their staff to do something that, when their staff is.
Would this be a recommendation?
But the other issue is that it's important for county staff to be involved in this process as much as possible because they're the ones who are going to own it.
I would assume that will be discussed in your IT coalition meetings and make a recommendation to us
That one.
about paying some of the people we've already got to do this conversion.
Well, I want to see, they have to come up with a proposal first, they need to come up with a schedule. And I'm waiting to see that. Once that, I have that, then we can talk about it.
My only question is Livingston, are you involved in this?
It's really, so this isn't really what Bruce does.
Well, you're an IT guy.
But we're not at the point where he's getting involved.
We're looking for
What we're talking about is software,
procurement.
business process software. So that's really kind of outside of the scope of, it's not really an IT function.
Livingston involved. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so in 5 words or less, I think we should keep Think IT on board, for going live with this thing. But, if you have 3 different vendors, say, that come in with their different segments of this thing, they'll send somebody in here. And Think IT, in my mind, they'll be coordinated. Okay, let's get the GL guys come in here. Let's get the commissioner revenue person to come in here. But they're not going to sit here while we learn. Okay, we'll have the software rep being here, teaching us how to use the stuff that we just bought from them.
I think one of the big concerns is gonna be, it's not just gonna be, I mean, software often causes, it will de facto cause changes in business processes. And it's not just internally, I mean, less so with Stephanie and Brian, because what they do is pretty isolated. But what I do, every department head is funneling. Every department is funneling into our department. How they process payroll, how they do procurement, how we pay bills. And some of this is it's going to go back to department heads, where they're going to have to do things differently. And some of this it's going to give you, department heads are going to be limited users on the new system. So like, for instance, instead of Candace sitting there at the end of the month and running a month P&L for you, you're going to have access to go and do it yourself. It may mean on the procurement side, instead of you typing up a PO and it going around in email box.
Efficiency.
Yeah, it's going to be an electronic process that starts with department heads, gets routed around whoever it needs to be routed to, and ends up electronically in our department. That's kind of like where we're going on this stuff.
The IT group will have a report for you, everybody.
Good. For the PowerPoint. All right.
50 slides.
Committees. Good.
Yeah, well, that's the big issue. It's a lot of this software applications that we're looking at are probably going to be cloud-based, and we definitely have network issues. That's where Bruce is really going to be involved.
Wait a second, you're telling me these mini satellite dishes on the buildings, those are sub-4?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't, I'm shocked. Yeah. Good Lord, we all do that. All right.
Testing's underway.
Good.
With the Amazon, we got online this week, we haven't had our
Good.
They are on the network now, so that would be the next step. The rest of the.
There's a couple issues, which is we could replace all the radios with Comcast connections, right? But then there's this question, this is what we're doing with the animal shelter right now. There's this open question about whether or not our My Telephone system can run on Comcast.
I certainly hope so. We need to find something.
Well, we're experimenting with that right now.
Good.
But there's costs related to that we don't have in the budget right now, because we don't know how to figure it out. But we think, so one of the other things that Bruce has been doing is he's been working on trying to replace the phone systems in the sheriff's office. And if we can do that and get rid of those Centrex costs, which was like $1,000 a month, we would free up $12,000 that we could spend on something else. So until we get all the answers to different pieces of this, we're not going to know what the net cost.
Technology, as a whole, sounds like y'all are making great progress. Really, really is. Thank God you're getting rid of the reflector dishes on the side of the building. Committees and organizations, the only one I see, Francois, what's the planning commission doing?
Planning Commission has, I'm sure I can speak with this thing. Planning Commission has a couple of inquiries, a couple of
Cases.
That's correct. Also looking at revising the bylaws.
And then, thank you. And also revising the definition of open space.
Good.
That's it.
Anybody got any questions for Francois? Thank y'all. Other committees and organizations, I don't see anybody else here. Old business. Greg Cave is on the GOTA meeting, and he's going to tell us about the animal control policy.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, we got you.
All right. So I just wanted to update the board on where we're at with the animal control policy. So, of course, we tackled that one first before the animal shelter policy. So you should have in front of you a copy of the revised copy of the animal control policy. Been working with Jack, Clarissa, Sean on updating it, whether there was any county ordinances, code sections, et cetera, that needed changing. We did that. Mainly just wanted to present this to the board this evening for y'all to review and let us know if you have any questions or if you see anything that needs to be added or taken out, definitely let us know. And as soon as we finish this, we will tackle the animal shelter policy and all three will be complete. Other than that, that's everything that I have. Just want to take time tonight and advise you where we are with that.
Man, a few words, Greg K. Hobbs, what do you have to say about this? Hobbs, anybody?
I only have 27 slides.
Great.
Spend as much time with this as you want, but this was a good and unveiling of a first draft of this package. We need to sit it down for everybody to review it and chop out. This is not a approval this evening. Just wanted to get it to the board and make it a public document so everybody can look at it. But we have the county attorney, the homeowner attorney, the sheriff, the shelter veterinarian, a lot of local groups and individuals associated with the county. A lot of folks touch this, so we've not been through that vetting process yet. So structure-wise, this has three big pieces you might worry about. One is a articulation of the county's policy when it comes to feral cats and feral cat colonies. There's a paragraph or two that was issued administratively several years ago, and this into a venue. Another problem that the animal control folks have is what is their relationship with law enforcement. So we want to say a few words about that, and who's responsible, and get some feedback from law enforcement on that. The third big piece is the animal control ordinance, and Greg here has put some time into edits to that to bring it up to speed with what's in the state code and so forth. But before that changes, the board will have to have a public hearing. But this is, like I say, this is a draft of the whole package. It's not approval. We can discuss it if you like. What I see happening is shopping this around, looking up, maybe getting it down to a couple of issues and then bringing it back.
Mr. Chairman, if I could comment briefly, Greg K deserves a lot of credit for sort of corralling everything that's been done on this legislatively over the years. This process began, I believe, in 2016 to 2017. So, and in the meantime, the Commonwealth of Virginia updated the ordinances in a way that required us to enumerate all of our ordinances. Greg did a pretty good job of going through all of those, which made my review of it much simpler. I think the goal, if you haven't seen the controlling officer ordinances, I think the date I have is March 23rd. It gives a nice summary as to what things had been. We have updated them to reflect the changes that were introduced in, I believe it was 2014. But once we pass this, our ordinances will be current, and we have tried to tie our ordinances to the state code where appropriate, so that if the state makes a change, we do not have to track that same change. Again, my compliments to Greg for work on this.
Who has questions, comments about this one?
Just one, so is this is this a policy or an ordinance?
There are two sections. One is the ordinances themselves, and the other is the operations manual.
So we have public hearing on the ordinance part.
That's correct.
Okay.
Anybody else review this thing? Greg has done a terrific job on it. Anybody else? I see Lori Counts is on here, and Mr. Mitch. We assume you all have been a copy of it. We'll take a little bit of everybody. Anything else on this? Let's go to the next one. Madison County Rescue Squad contract negotiations. Hobbs?
Yes, sir. And, this was back in there, we can chime in on this, but
this is to follow up on the discussion, I believe it was the last meeting, where there was this issue of funding the rescue squad and restoring their funding. The idea was that it's time for a reset in all of our contracts with the rescue squad, and so that's what I'm trying to set up here. Indicated motion. So that's the long and short of it. So the problem is that we have this whole series of contracts, different escape clauses, if you will, and all that. So my suggestion is that we put these in a package, just ask the rescue squad for a discussion on everything we have. To my knowledge, the longest one of those expires next June, be the first opportunity to be set. So if we package everything and make everything effective next July 1, then we should be in good shape. This would encompass things like our operating agreement, the ambulance rent issue, when the squad would provide service, and a series of other minor things. So I have a recommended motion on the screen, and I'm sure Mr. Hilson can elaborate on some of these things if you have questions. You certainly have subject matter experts.
Be careful. What do you have to say, Mr. Hilson?
I
Agree.
Yeah. This seems a little.
There you go.
We can't have this in effect before 2021. We can't make a change.
Good progress can be made and agreements reached, yes. I just put it out there that one of the contracts, I can't remember which one, indicates that we have to give them 12 months notice.
How much 12?
It renews on the fiscal year or something.
It all ties back to, let's just say it like this, it all ties back to money. So making it act as a fiscal year seems to make sense to me. And it knocks out the process side. I'm sure we can get a lot of this stuff renegotiated, kind of cleaned up, because there is, I think, the last rendition of it is what, 2012? With the ambulance costs, the insurance company paying it back. We just need to go in there, clean all this up, and deal with it. Real one day. Mr. Hobbs does have a motion, we do need to go notice. This formalizes things and make sure that we proceed.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, there's no doubt that just from what I've been exposed to over the last few months that this needs to be done. So I move that the Board of Supervisors pursue reviewing and updating all agreements between the Madison County Rescue Squad, such that a new contract will be in effect as of June 30th, 2021, and to officially request that the Madison County Rescue Squad participate in negotiations with the goal of agreeing upon an improved arrangement.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Of course, this does come with a lot of work. So like the topic for the next month or so to talk about who would be on the county's team and which will put the rescue squad on notice of this and ask them to put together someone. So be thinking about who might represent the board on this. Yes.
Come back. Any other old business, anything we're missing?
I've got an answer, Mr. Chairman,
What? Yeah, all right.
from our Central Virginia Partnership. their Jobs EQ, I think, software. Labor force participation rate for Madison age 16 and up is 6,431.
Oh, right.
600.
600.
So you got, well, we have 33 confirmed cases, John?
37.
37 confirmed cases, 601 people out of their jobs, and 6,500 and something
Yes,
that are potentially employed.
but some people may be making more being unemployed.
Yes, we've heard about these people. Fantastic system.
We did get your tax bill.
All right, moving on. We have two, under new business, we have two, fireworks permits here. Our 4th of July fireworks permits. It's absolutely incredible that we still haven't heard anything from the governor about this. I talked to Gray's Mountain Lodge today. I think we should postpone approving these until June 9th. Gives us a little bit more time, may get us to this. It's not going to, but it may give us a little bit more guidance. We can go from there. The Braves have proceeded, and I see Mr. Haynes wants to do one as well. We need to follow our executive officer's direction, and then also we should need to follow the health department. That's kind of where we're at.
And if I could chime in, that's what most localities are doing. Colonial Heights seems to be on top of this more than any other place for whatever reason. And they have deferred making any decisions, but it's also true that they have purchased their fireworks.
So, the other one is, Ligon got back to us, Luray is planning on continuing. Who else is on that list, Sean?
I do not remember. There were Colonial Heights, Luray, there was a lot.
I was thinking Williamsburg, maybe.
No, I think
There's a handful of them. They are going to proceed with this. 4th of July, kind of an important deal. But we'll see how that goes. Anybody got any problem deferring that till June 9th? Maybe we'll get more direction. Here, this is exciting. Mr. Hobbs, tell us about the Madison Free Clinic COVID-19 screening event.
Yes, we'd like to do a COVID screening event on Saturday, June 6th, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the County Administration Building parking lot. This, of course, is just in advance of their announced move away from this campus, which is since that's what. I see no reason why the county shouldn't do this, but it is an irregular activity. We did reach out to the museum folks to see if there was going to be any conflict, and we're advised that there would be none. So one time, one afternoon event, so it should be, they have a procedure where folks are supposed to call ahead and get an appointment to come do the screening. It's restricted to folks that do not have health insurance that would pay for such a test, and certain medical folks. The idea would be that they would come up front here, get whatever it is, and then grab it to the back.
For the COVID screening, the regular health, just blood pressure checks and stuff like that.
What?
They're separating them.
So it's,
And they have to show symptoms and they have to be symptomatic.
So we're doing a health clinic during a pandemic.
That is correct, sir.
wow.
So would you be doing regular health checkups?
Screening.
So are they testing for COVID or are they doing both sides?
No, both sides.
They screen people before they
Do the what? All right. And we don't have to give them access to this facility.
ask them so they can use
There you
their.
go. All right. What does everybody think here? Anybody have anything to say? Let's move on. What y'all want to do?
I think we need to adjust the motion maybe a little bit. We try something. I move to authorize the free clinic to host a general health screening and COVID-19 testing event on the Madison County Administration Center grounds at 414 North Madison, Main Street on June 6, 2020.
Second.
I got a question before we do this. I really haven't been paying attention to this testing thing. Everybody's talking about it. I'm not doing that. Are they having like general rushes of people to these events? I mean, is it a fairly substantial type of flow? I'm kind of, the only reason I ask is, would there be the potential that it could back up down into the, down on the main street?
Well, all I can tell you is they did one, last week in Colbert, and they did have 100 and some people show up with about 45 cases. But primarily in the Hispanic community. We don't have a large Hispanic community. You know, like I said, no crystal ball, but the cases that I understand that they want to test are going to be screened. They're probably already going to know who's coming for a COVID test.
So it's not going to become, we wouldn't have a big rash of people coming to this.
I don't think they anticipate that.
Good.
But when you say free, want people to show up anything. And I think they're gonna, so, yeah, I'm going to tell you.
Logistics. All right. Just a concern. Anybody else have any comments? Motion made, second, further discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign. All right. Let's talk about the county reopening transition plan. And is this where you have the video?
Well, I have to go look it up. I closed everything. They were here, but, everybody knows that we're in this, COVID mode here, and our posture has been to follow the guidance of the health department, and also the governor and the president, in general, I suppose. But, break this down in a couple of different ways. One is that we have this need to provide public services and maintain our service levels. And the way it looks is that we have front doors, but the offices have remained open. We strongly encourage people to conduct business by electronic means, that's email, websites, telephone, whatever. Second option is to send us something in the mail or we do it in Dropbox. And third option, if that's not practical, case-by-case basis, we invite people in on an appointment to come into the office. So it's not like we're completely closed through all this, but we need to do something different. We switched now to the need to be doing differently. Now we affect the internal organization, county employees. We have all these policies in place where we work from home. We have maybe outside the board's purview, these mandated COVID leave provisions that the SAM has passed down on us. We provided additional protective equipment, sanitizer, and all these things. Roger's gone around and installed windows for folks that have counters and so forth. We changed procedures in a lot of different ways. The EMS folks have particularly active dispatch and a lot of other folks that go through all that if you want. But a lot of this has happened outside of the board's oversight. So right now we're in this need for a transition to this doors locked mode, closed mode to more of a during the COVID mode where we're more open than we have. Able to move very fast on this because right now the governor is still in this phase 1 opening. And I went through this last meeting, but I told you I didn't see much difference between this phase 0 and this phase 1 as affects the county. But there is going to come a time when we have to open the doors. And so we need to get ready for that. So what I want to do is ask every department to come up with its own set of policies, its own opening plan, its own procedures, because we have all these different shops doing different things. They have different personnel with different attitudes. there's different authorities, different office layouts. It's not a one size fits all kind of thing. So I put together this document here in an attempt to do that. If you look at the back of it, you get down to the part of it. It's, everybody, please develop your own plan, using some guidance. This, health department's putting out. The governor's got a pretty good piece. This itself was developed from a good document I got from Valerie Ward at Social Services. This is Social Services model for this. Certainly nothing original here. But the idea is that we would get every department on some sort of program, and then we would ask that everybody let John share, Roger Berry, and we look at this for consistency and adequacy and advice and all that, so it could be approved on some level. A big point of concern, and the debate's coming, Jackson, you mentioned it earlier, the governor's issued this order that everybody that comes into a public space needs to be wearing a mask. So what we want to do is encourage everybody to wear masks. We'll make masks available to county employees. We'll make masks available to folks who want them to come to our spaces. But I'm not sure what the county's posture is when it comes to requiring people to wear masks or enforcing that. So that's just an open question. The idea is we would be following the governor's lead on this. I suppose the scheme is that we would be moving into phase 2 or something different next week or two. So we do need to get on top of this. No decisions been made about unlocking the doors or anything like that yet. We defer that until the governor and the health department indicate what they would have us do along those lines. So there's where we are.
Do you have any comment on this? It seems like a very sound plan.
One of the things that spurred this is Gardner put forward her program. And you'll know that she's down there with just a few part-time folks helping her out. So she's in a lot of ways a one-man shop, but she wants to open concurrent with the other visitor centers in the area, which is, that's a very good thing. I'm just not sure what the supervisors wants to be in a position to kind of review every individual office's opening plan because this evolves.
There needs to be a little bit of uniformity across the plate. I mean, the idea of your office down there having a different protocol than Brian's office, Miss Murray's office, and then Liggins' shop, it seems there needs to be some uniformity. I mean, that's what it really does. You else got anything on that?
That's where this is headed, right? So
That's pretty comprehensive. They covered a lot of stuff. I was like Tracy, I was hoping the governor would at least come out and give us a little bit of a phase 2 preempt so we can get ready for that type of thing. They see stuff out.
So right now we're playing it by ear with what the health department and governor wants to do. At least last week the scheme was the reopening on June 1 officially, but that word has yet to come down.
Fairfax, they're opening to phase 1, what, next Monday?
Right.
Right. So didn't he say that, so he said that the ceiling would be, he has set the ceiling and nobody in the state would be able to go past that. So we anticipate, based on what he has said, that after Friday, we have to wait 2 weeks until we potentially could be moving into that phase 2.
I got the indication that we could go to phase 2 with them saying phase 1. I just pour water on fire, so somebody would
We take it, I'll take your word. Let's hope it comes soon. Anybody have any issue with what Ms. Thompson proposed here? It seems very reasonable. All right. Anybody else got anything, any information and correspondence? Back to public comment. Public comment. Public comment. on the audio side of this. We still are having some issues. I think we're getting better, Livingston.
Honestly, just the microphone.
We're getting better. We're getting better.
It sounds good.
Anybody got any public comment? We do need to go to closed session.
Hello, this is Stephanie.
Yes.
Hey, I was going to say that it does sound better tonight, so thank you for whatever you've done, Bruce.
Good job, Bruce.
Stephanie got a new string on that phone she's got up in it.
You think that's what it is? Yeah. So, thank you all for what you do.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, closed session.
I move that the board convene in a closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711 E5, discussion concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion of an existing business or industry, where no previous announcement has been made of the business or industry's interest in locating or expanding its facilities in the community.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Somebody get French law, please. Thank you. That's unreasonable.
All right,
All right.
before we start, we gotta.
Thank you. You gotta kill all this stuff.
This conference will now be recorded.
Are we recording?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Ready?
Yes, ma'am.
I move the board reconvene in open session.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
I move to certify by roll call vote that only matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements pursuant to Virginia Code Sections 2.2-3711A5, only matters that were identified in the motion to convene in a closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Hoffman?
Aye.
Ms. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. McGee?
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Back in open session and certified. Anything further to signal? It's pleasure of the board.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Thank you. So,
Say your name. Say your name. Say my name like that.
We're officially in the minutes.